Oh, Phantasy Star III. If any game's the black sheep of the series, it's this one. It may not have an outright bad reputation, but many fans say to skip it nonetheless. I always try to see the value in these lesser regarded games, especially ones on old school consoles, cause I'm patient and have got no problem wading through some clunkiness to uncover what often turn out to be shiny gems, of which the previous game, Phantasy Star II, is a sterling example. Even my patience wasn't enough for this one though. I love Phantasy Star III for many reasons, but core gameplay is not one of them. That's one hefty flaw, so I've got to start there. More than any other JRPG I've played, Phantasy Star III forces you to trek back and forth between the same handful of locations over and over before sending you to a slightly different hub area and repeat. The first game had cool gameplay variety like the Land Rover or Ice Digger. Now there's one boat on one planet, and riding it's an automated sequence. Other than that, you've gotta hoof it. Lame. Worse, you can only access a few samey planets full of the same grass, desert, ice, and water scenery from the last two games. It feels like a cut and paste job even though these are new locations. More on the world building in a bit, but on top of that, these areas are small with only a few points of interest and vast fields of bland nothingness. That means a lot of wandering around until you find your goal. Thankfully, the NPCs give pretty clear directions on where to head next, most of the time. Before I go on, consider leaving a like, it really helps the channel reach other RPG fans, and subscribe for more videos like this. Even with maps, it takes ages to get anywhere in Phantasy Star III, a problem exacerbated by a sluggish interface and downright dreadful combat. It suffers from the worst case of mash A to win that I've seen in over 125 JRPGs, and yes, I keep count. Other games might be more monotonous, but Phantasy Star III foists its monotony upon you. That's due to one reason. The default option in combat is to auto-attack with everyone. Manually choosing attacks for every character feels like hard labor in comparison, and I'm not exaggerating, is only worth doing in boss battles. Even that's a stretch. Regular battles are so easy you can close your eyes, hold a direction, and mash A to reach your destination. That's true in dungeons too, making all the customization and party choices moot. The only reason to grind is to buy better weapons, which just make combat easier. I still obsessively tinkered with my party, organizing everybody to a T, since that's fun no matter what, but I learned to stop expecting any payoff from it. What a sharp contrast from the previous games. Phantasy Star III makes it evident why old school JRPGs needed to be tough, filled with brutal dungeons and grueling encounters. It feels better when you succeed by a hair's width, and worse when you push too far and fail. That kind of tension-building trade-off makes this kind of game. Without modern-day frills to provide distractions from the otherwise rote gameplay, Phantasy Star III's failure in this aspect is impossible to ignore. Couple that with unattractive scenery, little optional content, and a story that crawls along as you walk to tell a guy in a cave something, then go report back to a townsperson, then back to the cave, back to town, and finally to a dungeon. Repeat that about 1 billion times, backtracking to several locations all the while, and that's the game. There's no charming surprises, no quirks, nothing new that made me go, huh, haven't seen that in a JRPG before. And in a rather disappointing turn, moving between planets, rather than a quick rocket ship cutscene, now plays out as a mini-dungeon, filled with encounters dragging down the pace further. Thankfully, plenty of interesting scenes await when you do reach the plot triggers, but they're over in a flash, then back to the snooze fest of gameplay. Together, these problems make Phantasy Star III feel more like an early JRPG than it should. We're talking about a Genesis game from 1990 for Christ's sake. All this disappoints me greatly, cause this third entry in the beloved series has a ton going for it otherwise. Practically every other aspect of the game is sublime, from the music, a blown-out, bombastic take on Phantasy Star II's ideas, to the structure, with branching paths spanning generations, to the genuinely great story, one of the best I've seen in an RPG relative to its contemporaries. Let's back up to the music first though. New series composer Izuho Takeuchi, now Numata, who went on to co-write Phantasy Star IV's soundtrack, puts her imprint on the landscape of possibilities for the Genesis sound hardware, laying down some real out-there stuff. There's way more atmosphere than even Phantasy Star II, with several tracks featuring incredible dynamic range and chunky sounds. Like, check out this song called Fortune Teller. There's so much going on in that. Did you notice the high-pitched wee 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 in the background? Takeuchi's layering blows me away. The tinnier bell sounds in some tracks did grate my ears a bit, but hey, this wasn't meant to be heard through headphones, so I'll give the OST a pass there. Plus, I kinda like that aspect. It gives me a harmony of dissonance vibe, another soundtrack I adore. These harsh sounds achieve their goal of sounding like real instruments. Kind of. The total package also reminds me a lot of the Shinen series, but that might be because they're both on Genesis and have similar sound profiles. Regardless, it's the best so far in a series of nothing but strong soundtracks. Now, for the rest of the video, I'll be talking minor spoilers, with some big ones at the very end. If you're into Phantasy Star lore and do plan to go check out the game at some point, maybe skip this next part. It's best to go in blind. Otherwise, let's go! Story and structure go hand in hand in Phantasy Star III since you play as 3 generations of characters, following a man, his son, and eventual grandson or granddaughter. Dragon Quest V step aside, Phantasy Star III did marriage in a JRPG earlier, and I'd argue better. That's right, at the end of each act, you choose one of 2 characters to marry, then you play as their child, grown up and ready for action. Again, serious Dragon Quest V vibes. Who you marry affects the whole plot and more. Some paths play out similarly, but others vary wildly, sending you to different locations to meet different characters, even different party members. So after the second marriage choice, you'll end up in one of 4 possible ending scenarios, meaning if you want the complete experience, you'll have to start over from before each path split and play on. Or watch some YouTube videos. In my case, one playthrough of this game was enough for me. Earlier, I said there's multiple planets, but I lied. In a first for the series, that's not the case in Phantasy Star III. Instead, you're on a giant colony ship, the size of a small planet, apparently, divided into 7 sectors, each with their own biome. They're effectively like the planets from the first game, except traveling between them ain't as fun as I mentioned. The lore, however, is crazy. 2 opposing factions, the Iraqians and the Lions, inhabit their worlds, and, even 1,000 years after a ceasefire was called, still generally distrust each other. You start out as the Iraqian Prince Reese, sent to marry an amnesiac chick named Maya, who eventually reveals herself as a lion. Uh-oh. Not only that, she's a princess and the Lions think you captured her. Events ensue and you eventually have to choose between marrying Maya or your hometown Iraqian sweetheart, Lena. I went with Maya since only people of lion blood can use magic, and her son, Ayn, turned out to be a beast. Really though, I can't imagine the game being tough regardless of who you pick. I won't go through all the scenarios, but the characters eventually find out their world's true nature, that it's a colony ship, as well as the fact that everyone on the ship actually descends from the people of Palma, the starting planet of the first game. Those resourceful bastards managed to launch a ship before Palma was destroyed in Phantasy Star II, and here we are, well over 1,000 years later. While that huge time gap seemingly disconnects the story from what came before, Phantasy Star III manages to integrate the villain from the first 2 games into the story in a pretty damn cool way. See, the party experiences a vision from an old pendant of a lion hero of antiquity and learns that the Lions and Iraqians must join together to take on the evil Dark Force. It comes a little out of nowhere, but it's something. Hey, a near-omnipotent Dark Force doesn't die of old age, and makes for a satisfying final battle, given that I've played the previous entries. As far as I understand, this all takes place long after even Phantasy Star IV, and marks the proper ending of the series up till this point. Well damn. This ain't mind-blowing storytelling by any means, and I won't detail plot beats and character conflicts, it's just solid stuff all the way through, especially for a sci-fi meets fantasy game. Spells now fall under techniques and belong to specific schools, and only certain characters can learn certain schools, like the capability to cast spells. This can't be changed, and seems to follow hereditary lines, making it clear these are scientifically explainable abilities humans have somehow developed so far into the future. You can even tune your spellcaster's genetics to make certain spells more effective by weakening others. This is the early example of what I suppose is a stat redistribution or custom stat balancing system that I've seen in a JRPG. Panzer Dragoon Saga did something similar much later in the decade with its adjustable dragon stats, by the way. Iraqians get techniques of their own, but purely on the physical side, nothing magical and nothing as useful. They're your bruiser characters, and you'll want at least a few so that mashing A doesn't take so long. Don't get me wrong about the easy difficulty. You'll take damage and you'll need to manage your healing, only it's never a problem doing so and is therefore boring. Just about the only thing that kept me on my toes is the poison status of all things. Poison's weird in Phantasy Star III. It's actually a heal blocker. When poisoned, you don't lose any HP, but you can't be healed by any means. You gotta use an antidote, use the anti-spell, which hilariously has a high chance to fail, or heal back in town. All more of an annoyance than anything. I'm not complaining though, that's exactly the kind of old school tough I wanted more of out of this game. Optional party members return and get fleshed out more this time. Choosing the right balance between Iraqians and Lions sounds like a deep mechanic, but you'll typically want at least 1 or 2 Lions with strengthened healing spells, and the rest Iraqian fighters. There's not much meaningful choice unless you're looking for a self-imposed challenge, but I'll take this system over a standard set party any day. Even the illusion of choice feels good. Other bits of gold haven't escaped my notice. The battle music changes when you attack, for example, a strange yet original decision that I wouldn't want in every game but helps PS3 stand out. The overworld theme also adds a layer with each new party member, something I've seen before but not in an earlier JRPG. That's pretty cool. Even better, the dungeon themes, especially the first, are perhaps the best I've heard in an old school RPG. Yeah, really. Hearing that crispy, devilish tune while stumbling my way through the first dungeon made me grip my controller tighter for sure. Thankfully, the game still felt a little difficult by that point. Brilliant touches like that make me want to like Phantasy Star III more than I can honestly say I do. It's just so flawed. The visuals are subpar, especially for the series. The previous 2 games were gorgeous. This one's kinda plain. It's got a few cool animated battle backgrounds, but even more samey looking dungeons and overworld areas. Phantasy Star II had way more variety to keep me interested the whole time. In PS3, I was already tired of every area after around 7 hours of total gameplay. Enemy sprites have neat designs, but meh animations you'll see over and over. Characters look good, but nothing special, and the individual plot points aren't exciting compared to the wacky world building. It's a shame the things I like about the story, characters, and music fail to make up for the downright mediocrity everywhere else. Yet Phantasy Star III feels special despite its flaws. I'd probably rank it in A or high B on a tier list despite it having more objective problems than many games I'd rank lower. Sometimes you've got to step back and look at the whole, and PS3's wild ambition leaves me impressed. Thanks for watching. I've been Leon from RPG Haven. Leave a like for that algorithm, let me know your thoughts on Phantasy Star III in the comments, subscribe for more videos on RPGs of all kinds, and have a blessed day.